Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new podcast. Today, I've got a very special guest who's going to be talking to us about AI in hospitality. And AI in hospitality has moved, very quickly beyond theory. But it seems from our chat yesterday before the podcast that adoption seems very fragmented. Some hotels are embedding AI now in parts and parts of the business where, in fact, one could argue that AI has been around for a while and that we were sort of using it without calling it AI in revenue management models and CRM and that type of thing. So it's sort of being bolted on to existing systems, but a lot of the industry still operates through very distinct sort of siloed systems and manual processes. So, what I thought would be interesting today is to explore whether hospitality is sort of genuinely transforming or simply layering these tools that are available, whether it be a chatbot or instead of using a call center or whatever, and bolting these things onto old operating models. And what happens if the industry moves too slowly? Is it, in other words, is it really as transformational as people are saying? And I thought that to help unravel this, I'd like to bring somebody in. So I thought, who better than Ian Wilson? And Ian Wilson and I go back a long way. When I was at Hotel Icon, I brought a team to visit Marina Bay Sands, where he was the senior vice president there. And I know that they were looking at efficiencies and operating models at that massive hotel in Singapore. And then he's turned AI specialist now, someone who's basically crossed the floor because he saw there was a gap. There was a gap between what technology could do and how the industry was actually using it. And I know he's been very helpful to the Singapore government in different capacities and to also private industries. And he was recently in Saudi Arabia. So, Ian, welcome. And Ian, perhaps you could give us the sort of short version of how, as a hotelier, you ended up specializing in AI.
Well, thank you for having me on, Richard. And I think it's certainly a very interesting topic. It's very timely, and it's certainly something that I'm passionate about. I guess let me start by managing expectations. I can't claim to be an expert in AI. I think I would claim to be very knowledgeable about how AI can be used, but I wouldn't claim to be the person or the technical expert who is going to go and do it for you. And I think probably the foundation of all AI is data, and that's really where I kind of started my journey. I am a hotelier through and through. Like you, probably I've worked in all areas of the hotel, starting as a dishwasher and as a houseman, but really kind of moved through many things. I think there's a couple of things that kind of propelled me in this direction. One was that I started really looking at how lean could help hotels and how this process oriented look at things. And of course, foundational to lean is how do you start to measure things? And if you're going to measure things, that in essence is data. So, how do you get better data to understand what's actually going on in your hotel? When I was working at Marina Bay Sands, of course, I was working in great proximity to a huge casino, and casinos are some of the most data-driven places you will ever see. So my thinking was, why is this being applied in the casino space but not in the hotel space? So I set about learning what these analytics were and how we might be able to apply them. And by the time I finished at Marina Bay Sands, I think I had 10 data scientists reporting to me, and really a very different view on the world. I did some consulting for the government of Singapore, mentoring companies on how to use data to achieve data-driven cultures. I think we worked through about 30 cultures or 30 companies. And then for the last 4 years, I've been working in Saudi Arabia, where we were focusing on what the future of hospitality was. And we were planning for 100,000 rooms in the line. And how are you going to run these, especially when you have the prospect of decreasing labor resources and increasing costs as you go forward. So, how do you plan from the beginning to allow you to continuously improve and to capture that? So, I have now left Neom, and I'm working on I guess, a stealth company, which is really creating an AI and data-driven platform, which I would say is really next generation, far more efficient than many of the models today. It's got its roots in national security, and is only now being released to be able to be utilized. And so I'm looking at how that could help hospitality, and that's always been, something that I've been very passionate about. And how do we run our business more intelligently, as opposed to a lot of tradition, gut feel, and a place where we have many sacred cows.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very interesting. Is that organization or that company that you just mentioned, is
Mm-hmm.
that based in Singapore, or is that a
The,
company
the, tech,
that you
the
founded? Or
Well, I'm working with others, and the technology actually comes out of a gentleman who worked for national security for many years, and then he worked for other defense industry leaders, and then has worked in more of an academic field, but really focusing on how they can apply these technologies to healthcare on a
okay,
massive scale.
right.
But it's got agency built into it, and AI or LLMs, I guess, if you want to be more specific, built on top of it to give it the oomph it needs, but in a more efficient way than what's currently being done.
Right. I mean, there is a tremendous amount of noise around AI and hospitality. There's always a lot of very complex, colorful looking graphics on LinkedIn every day. You see people popping stuff up there, talking about how the industry can or should be using it. I mean, there's a lot of noise around it, but how much of it is actually transformational, if you like, rather than isolated point solutions, which we talked about a little bit yesterday? That no one's really building hotels around AI. It's all kind of bolted on like plastic surgery, if you like. Is there a point at which hotels are sort of struggling with the notion of it, or they see it as a fantastic opportunity? I mean, where does it really break down into you being a useful tool? And well, if we can afford it, we'll get it, rather than we don't want to be left behind.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I would say that there's a huge amount of, I call it hysteria, and it reminds me actually of the when OTAs came into the industry, and everyone was like, "You're not in an OTA, you're gonna lose out." Everybody is kind of AI washing. Investors are asking, owners are asking, "What are you doing?" So everybody's got to be doing something, but I don't see anything other than point solutions at this point. And it's not to say that they're not helpful. Many vendors are rushing to try and add AI to their software so that they can, speak to being an AI enabled. Companies have looked at how they can use tools like chatbots to query, to help customers or to handle internal processes. Things like human resources information is another one that we were even doing at Marina Bay Sands before I left. But I have not seen anybody systemically implement an AI first approach to hospitality. And candidly, almost nowhere is someone doing an AI first approach to a business, though I think that they will start to emerge. It's not a simple thing to do, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but it really would require you to kind of tear at the heart of your hotel and rethink how every single piece, and particularly the culture, would work in order to implement it in that manner. Um, I think that's probably my best estimate of where things are at today.
So is the this sort of still this absence of real sort of data culture that is the blocker beneath a lot of people, those sort of naysayers that are saying, oh, it's just another fad. I mean, I remember at Icon when we were experimenting with a sort of smart room, and this was going to be the room of the future, and all that. And this was like 10, 12 years ago. And yet, it's a lot of hotel rooms are still being built in exactly the same way. And I think also, I was talking to a cluster general manager in Bangkok from Marriott about some issues to do with sustainability the other day. And he was saying that, unless the owner sees a tangible ROI, it doesn't matter really what the mothership brand really wants. Ultimately, the owner has to agree, and if it's going to cost them more money, and they don't see the ROI, so I think the big question is, where's the ROI come into the picture, and how does one go about convincing owners that it's
Well,
something to live with? Yeah,
so you're almost really hitting into the crux of the issue, which is why I don't think you're going to see a lot of innovation anytime soon. Um, the crux of the issue is that the brands themselves will not pay to fundamentally change these things, and it would be a bad business decision in many ways to do so, because who truly benefits if you spend a ton of money optimizing through artificial intelligence and a data-driven culture the performance of a hotel? Well, it will earn very little incremental income for the hotel brand, because the bulk of their money comes from their base fee, the fees that they charge the hotel, which they can then offset all their fixed costs against. And then, of course, there's a sliding scale for incentive. And most of those incentives are set at a level that they're relatively achievable. And so being able to get a little bit better and a little bit better actually has very small ROI for a hotel. So if I'm the CEO of a major hotel brand and I go and pitch to my board that I'm going to spend a gazillion dollars at trying to transform every hotel, because it wouldn't actually be even the technology would be the hardest part. It would be changing the culture in all these hotels,
mm,
as opposed to spending that money to grow my portfolio of hotels. It will be a very short discussion, because I make 15% in round terms between fees and the chargeable fees and the base fee and the incentive fee on a new hotel. And if I put all of this stuff in, I'm going to be making a couple of percent more or a few percent more on a hotel. However,
right,
from an owner's perspective, every dollar of EBITDA that goes to the bottom line could be worth, depending on what the cap rate is of the market, um, $10 to $20 more in terms of the value of that asset. So you put $1 million more onto the bottom line, that's a $15 to $20 million lift in terms of the value of the asset. That's, if it's $20 million, being if you have a very low cap rate, then that's $15 million you might be able to pull out of that property
right.
to put towards another investment. So I don't think the brands are going to do it anytime soon. I don't know that the owners truly understand it. And I don't think that the owners can get access to the data in the hotels in order to try and do a bunch of this stuff themselves. So you have a bit of a quagmire. And it actually is a prime forum for disruption, not to once again go down another path, but maybe that's a better one for another day. But I think that there's the industry is manifesting itself in a manner that would make it very vulnerable to disruption.
Right. Well, that's very interesting. And I mean, leading on from that, a GM, if you like, with a limited budget, okay, one starting point, low hanging fruit. It's not going to cost him an arm and a leg. He's not going to get thrown out of the boardroom by the owner. Where's the starting point? I mean, where do you send them first, if you like, to you're an advisor. You've been pulled in. Maybe the hotel group has only got 5 or 6 properties. They're in Bali or in Singapore, Hong Kong. What are you going to tell them is low hanging fruit and where they can really achieve some gains?
Well, I would say that the first step is to just start and to start to look at what data you can actually get. Hotels are awash in data, but it is very poorly used. There's a fair amount that's utilized in the distribution, the revenue management side, and the brands push that because that pushes top line revenue, which of course drives the amount of fees that you're going to earn out of a property. And it's also much more manageable from the center of the company than to have to go to 5,000 hotels and teach them how to do things. So begin. There's a million courses that you could look at, or probably more pragmatically, get someone young who has some inclination this way, or even better, someone who's gone through a data science course. And you might be quite shocked what they could achieve with Excel alone. And you could build Power BI on top of it, and you would start to already have some fairly significant insights into it before you start getting into databases and everything else. I think more importantly, or equally importantly to that, though, is everyone expects that you're going to use, it used to be machine learning was a magical thing. Now it's the LLM that's a magical thing, that you're going to suddenly, put all this data in a big pile, and then you're going to use the magic machine learning on it, and it will instantly produce the secrets of life, the universe, and everything. But the reality is that you don't get anything out of it unless you have good questions. And I think it was Einstein who said that, if I had to solve a problem and my life depended on it and I had 1 hour, I would spend the first 55 minutes thinking about what the appropriate question is that needs to be answered. And then it would be easy to solve it in the last 5 minutes. So, as a hotelier, what is the most important question that you wish you could answer that's going to generate the most, ultimately, the most profit for you? Because even if it's a customer service question, if it will then result in greater loyalty or repeat patronage or advocacy or whatever it may be, or spend, then it still results on the bottom line. And at the end of the day, all these things, all these KPIs feed into your profitability.
So, other than chasing revenue through, say, revenue management gains, or let's say the big one that everybody's been grappling with for years is how to get people to book direct, rather than through OTAs. I mean, do you see, operational gains in that kind of marketing distribution area to use AI as a tool to get people to book direct? Or in other areas, one comes, when you think of like staffing or engineering as is a big one, procurement, um, and also service recovery. I mean, do you envisage like one company coming up that gives you a solution for all of these, and you can buy components? Or you see individual companies that specialize in solutions? I mean, a lot of them already exist. I mean, to be
Yep.
honest with you, and that's why I'm wondering, scratching my head, thinking, "Hang on a minute, isn't this sort of something that we've already got?" I mean, we used to use Sendine, we used Duetto when it first came out, Ideas. I mean, they're all basically using. We didn't used to call it AI at the time, but it's. What is your thoughts around this?
Well, that's a very long and a large question that you put. Um, I think that you will not get the real synergy unless you look at the whole thing systemically. So I'll digress for a minute.
Yeah.
Electricity didn't start to change the world until it was available everywhere, and you had a comprehensive implementation of it. The internet didn't really start to change the world until you had a comprehensive implementation of it, and it was available on your mobile, on your laptop, by Wi-Fi, and then it has absolutely changed the world, the way the world operates. These are systemic implementations. Data is not going to change the world until you start to look at it systemically and comprehensively. And where do you find examples of this? So, I'm not just blowing smoke. Well, the best example I can think of is Formula One. So, Formula One, they measure absolutely everything, and that allows them to continuously improve absolutely every metric. But if you need other proof points, we've all seen, or some of you have seen the movie Moneyball. Well, they started to take a very different approach by measuring how the game worked, and they started to challenge sacred cows. That's gone on to basketball and hockey and football and many other things. But there's many other industries. I mean, if you go to finance, if you look at trading, I mean, it's so algorithm rich that they are absolutely fanatically focused on the data. But hospitality has never embraced that view, though we actually have a huge amount of data that we can do, particularly with the advent of cameras today, that would allow you to measure how your operation is functioning. But it has never actually happened. So, yes, there is true value from these point solutions. I don't want to be a naysayer. AI has helped revenue management tremendously with different algorithms, but in some ways, these things are becoming a bit dated, and you also don't understand the relationship between very disparate things. So, when I was at Marina Bay Sands, when we started layering on top of each other everything to do with a customer and all that information, all of the information out of our systems, all of the human resources data, all of your building data, and then you start to look at information in the environment around you. Now you start to understand how this point over here starts to impact this point over here, and how that can change your operation. And when you start to do that, it then fundamentally changes the culture that you have within your organization. So I think you will see vendors continue to pack AI or these solutions and reporting into their things, but you're only getting a sliver, and everything
Yeah.
is in isolation from everything else. So it doesn't let you understand the kind of the whole comprehensive view, which is really where you start to get the deeper insights into what's really going on. And of course, you
Yeah.
once again have to have the right question. The other thing is that everyone is charging you for that. So I've got my
Yeah.
reporting suite in 6 different pieces of software, as opposed to saying, I'm going to actually just um, build knowledge in the center of this organization, which will allow me to understand all these things. And then I start to become actually software agnostic. And that, of course, that notion is terrifying for software vendors, because a lot of software has way more capability than is actually used by many hotel companies, or they kind of hold your data hostage a little bit and make it a bit difficult to get it. But the value really comes when you bring these things together, and then you become somewhat more agnostic about what that platform is. And if you have
Mm.
to change it, you are not beholden to them, because all of your customer profiles are not in one piece of software, or your accounting information or other things. You can gain insights in other places, and you could swap systems. So I'm not sure that I've comprehensively answered your question, because you asked a number of small ones, but that's really where
Sure.
I see things at.
Yeah, no, that covers kind of what I was really getting at. And I think that my own observation is that, having talked to quite a lot of people on my podcasts and things, and I bring this subject up, I think that a lot of misunderstanding, that it's almost like some people think that it's like those diagnostic tools that you can put onto your car. I mean, I used to have an old Porsche in Hong Kong that was very 1980s. You couldn't put a diagnostic tool in that and tell you what was wrong with it. But modern day cars now, you can just put in a diagnostic tool before you buy the thing, and it'll tell you everything that's wrong with it, and where, if where what's about to blow up, or the bulb is on the blink. But it's not like connecting your hotel to some magic um, system that is going to tell you everywhere you need to make efficiencies. And I think that's the thing, that you really need people in the team now who, as you say, who are more like data experts, which is what you were doing. And when you were doing it back in Marina Bay Sands, you didn't have the tools that necessarily we might have now, right?
Oh, no,
So,
no, no, nowhere near. But I don't know
yeah,
that you don't need a whole bunch of data experts. You need people who ask good questions. They can be very
right,
obvious
is what you
questions,
were
but
saying.
you need
Yeah, yeah,
curious people, and then you
right.
need an approach to how are you going to measure something, and then how do you determine ways to improve that, and did it work? And you have to be willing to make some mistakes too, because not
Yeah,
everything works. And hoteliers tend to be very risk adverse. So how do you fail really small? But you need to invoke that real entrepreneurial spirit, and then try and get an idea about cause and effect, and what's working, and what's not working. And I think that as you do that, you then start to build a flywheel of improvement within your organization. And once again, I'm going to give you the sports analogies. I mean, I think one of the things you'd asked me before is that if you don't start now, is that going to be a problem for you? Well, if
yeah.
your biggest competitor starts now, think about a Formula One team waiting half a season before they started improving their car. I mean, they would be
Mm,
so far
sure,
behind. And
sure.
every single hotel is different. So it's not like I can just cut and paste this in. Even if it's an identical hotel, the team is different, the market is different, the customers are different. So there is no one size fits all. And that's why I actually Benchmarking is useful, but it's only so useful because every hotel has its own idiosyncrasies. What I focus on more is, have you improved? Are you getting better? Is there a continuous improvement? And measuring all the way down to saying, is everybody pulling their weight and is everybody improving?
Yeah.
No different than a sports team would be.
Right, right. So, where is AI making the most sort of tangible difference to, let's say, the guest experience side of it? Not in theory, but in practice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think people, the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit for people, especially with LLMs, has been various forms of chatbot. And I think that we see some better and some worse examples of that within the industry. Trip planning is very good. That's kind of adjacent to our business, but it can be very useful. I mean, revenue management and distribution, these are key ones, but I think they need to look at how they integrate marketing into that too. So when you were talking about trying to get more people to book direct, well, I think you need to understand what are the most profitable customers and how are they booking, and then how do you market to get them, and then how do you start to run experiments to see whether you're capturing more of those people and what the best channel is. So, for instance, so it's extremely iterative as you go forward. But you don't have to be a data scientist to do this. You just have to have a data scientist who can help you answer the questions that you have and get that information to you in a timely manner to help you then continue to improve. But it is a very different way of running a culture than what operates today.
And is there a version of AI adoption that sort of might improve efficiencies, but indirectly is damaging the guest experience? Because they're cutting it too fine, or they're whatever. Is there anything that you see could be?
Well, I think that, and by the way, there's other examples of where AI is being employed in energy and other things in our last question, but um, I think that that's really entirely up to the hotel because
Yeah,
it's almost dependent or specific by hotel, and I would almost say by customer. Because when I was reflecting on this, I'm a very different person when I'm traveling on business than when I'm traveling on leisure. And when I'm on business, I'm probably incredibly happy to chat with a chatbot if I know that it works and it increases my efficiency and I can fly through that property, maybe not talking to anyone. I'd be a really happy camper. I get my key, go through. It's like getting onto an airplane or everything else. It's all programmed for that. But when you're on leisure, you want to have that interaction. You want the local color. You want to talk to people. So what's the right amount? And maybe it's how do you make it at the guest's option? We got this or we got this, but both of them work perfectly. What it can never do is it can never erode the customer's experience. It has only, and that is not setting too high of a bar. If you're going to do this, it better be improving customer experience or do not use it at all. Don't slough it off as we're just trying to increase efficiency. And I'm sorry you had to suffer. And I think that is the wrong. I think you have to be absolutely uncompromising. Of course, it's going to vary by category of hotel too. So, with certain categories of hotel, you would never want to have an AI talking to people, though, quite honestly, Four Seasons has a chat mechanism, and others do as well. So it's not that there is not being employed, but it is being employed in ways that are thoughtful and that are beneficial to the customer.
mm. I mean, that's a very good point. In this country, in the UK, when you're driving along, you're listening to the radio, you'll hear advertising for big companies like Energy, Octopus Energy, and some of these British Gas, or other big organizations where they're selling to the everyday UK household, and they're, or even like insurance, motor car insurance, house insurance, and what they're promoting is not a product, but they're promoting the fact that when you call us with a problem, you'll speak to a real person.
Hmm.
That's their sole. I mean, I was thinking about it. I heard it must have, I was driving up to Loughborough the other day. It was like a 3 hour trip. And I must have heard it a dozen times from different organizations where they're actually promoting, advertising the fact that if you use us, if you switch to us, you'll talk to a real person if you have a problem.
Hmm.
So that made me wonder whether, is there a sort of line between whether, technology enabling better human interaction and replacing it completely. I mean, you don't want hotels where it could be actually quite damaging if you go down that line where people are frustrated because they want to see a face.
Yep. I think that my view on the whole thing is that A, the technology's got to work, and B, you always need a human in the loop. So if you need a human, just say human, but you may have to wait 5 minutes for a human. I used to run call centers, and the reality is that, especially for utilities and other things, you might have a significant wait, especially if
Yeah.
something has happened, et cetera. So it might be more beneficial if the technology really works to be able to just chat. But I haven't found a whole lot of these tools that work really well, except for very tightly scripted things like I need to make a reservation, between this time and this time, in which case there's pretty big guardrails and you can't go too far off course. But when you're calling a customer service center about anything, they quickly run out of gas or it gets way too expensive because you're blowing through a huge number of tokens to try and answer all of these calls. And that's not necessarily an economic model too. And that's the thing that people are not really talking about as it relates to AI right now is that, in the area of coding, for instance, there's been a lot of news lately that people are saying it's not economical to use this. Uber was on a couple of days ago saying that the CTO is saying that they had blown through their entire technology budget in 3 or 4 months. And because of it, and they were backpedaling. Microsoft had some interesting news on that too. Meanwhile, Anthropic, who has a marvelous product, Claude, but they charge for it. They're on the verge of breaking even. OpenAI, which has not maybe charged as much, maybe the product's not quite as good, is a long way from breaking even. So you do actually question whether the current approach to artificial intelligence is actually economically viable. So I think if your whole view is I'm just going to put a chatbot over everything I do in my hotel or an LLM, you're going to run into significant, well, let's just say owner issues very quickly because your bills might be a whole heck of a lot higher than you think. So there's got to be a better technology or a better way to do it. And that's kind of what I've been pursuing as well, how you don't blow through a billion tokens. But, walk before you run. There's a huge amount of artificial intelligence that's very approachable. And a lot of what happens in a hotel today, if you just start measuring things and using the data, you will improve your performance. And then, use the LLM selectively, maybe to talk to your data, to help ask questions or answer things if you have it. The other reality, though, is almost, well, I won't say almost no one, but very few companies have their own proprietary LLM as well. So if you're putting stuff into this, it's going on to the world, and you may have all sorts of stuff that you didn't want shared. And I'm sure it's happening because you're getting amazing insights out of ChatGPT or Claude or other things, and that's because somebody somewhere has loaded something in to try and use AI to help them answer a question or do some work. And now that's courtesy, it's nice machine learning or it's nice information for the rest of the world.
That's very interesting. So, what do you think it would take for AI in hospitality to move, if you like, beyond the one point solutions to something, if for want of a better word, operationally transformative? I mean, I guess they could come to somebody like you and say, "Can you come and tell us where we are? We want to look at it holistically." Um, or is that where the big disruption comes in that you talked about?
Well, I mean, I think you can make incremental gains with the existing business models. And I think that's all that they are likely to be able to do, unless the pain of, say, being short staffed or other things gets so extreme that they have to move. It's not that they can't afford it, it's just not good business at this point in time for them to
Yeah.
do it. So to really transform a business, I mean, you kind of got to gut it, or you need to create a competitor which will compete head to head with your mother brand, and you built it from the ground up. And so it is an area that I believe is ripe for disruption. And so companies don't typically disrupt themselves. It's not good business. And we discussed Clayton Christensen, who's an expert in this area. Very interesting case studies on how businesses make absolutely the right business decision and then get disrupted as a result of it, which is it's called the innovator's dilemma, and it's a fascinating paradox.
Yeah, I I looked at that after you mentioned it to me yesterday, and it brought up a lot of questions in my mind about. Yeah, I remember a few years back when people were talking about Airbnb, and there was a lot of panic at that. Oh, what's going to happen to hotels? But it seems that quite often with these things like Airbnb, it's just absorbed into the business model, and it
Well,
never really became the massive, thing that everybody thought it was going to be. This massive disruptor.
Well, I mean, how many rooms does Airbnb have? If they were a hotel company, they'd be the biggest in the world. So I would
Yeah,
argue it has been a massive disruption, and that's all revenue that hotels aren't capturing. We've just become complacent, or we've just grown to accept the fact that that has actually happened. Remember, the hotel industry is in a wonderful place globally. What's happening around the world is that in many parts of the world, GDP per capita is growing, especially if you look at South Asia, Southeast Asia, China, huge, huge, huge markets, many others as well. And as that happens, people tend to A, want to travel domestically and then travel internationally. And so if you're in the hotel business, that means I need more hotels. And that it's going to be a growing business, which is much better than, say, if you're in education in some of these developed countries or other things where you have a falling number of students. So I think if you do the math, look what was the revenue of Airbnb, especially not just what they made, but what all the hosts made. That's money that didn't go to a hotel. That was a massive disruption.
so if you look at a typical hotel sort of structure, like an XCOM team in a I don't know, 300-400 room hotel in Asia, whose department does this come under? I mean, if you're the GM, who are you going to kind of toss this to look at more closely?
Well, ultimately, it should be under the GM. They have to, if you're not pushing this from the very top, and candidly, it's got to be above you, then it's not going to happen. You can't just give this to the head of ops because finance won't get along with it or marketing won't get along with it. It's got to come from the very top of the organization. There's got to be a vision and some conviction that you need to do it. And then how you run the operation will be very different. I mean, my view is that in 10 years time or 20 years time, or as we see disruption come in, you're going to see much flatter organizations. You're going to have more empowerment. I call it data democratization. You're going to push decision making down so that you can be incredibly agile, but you can measure how everybody is doing. So it's not that I'm lying awake at night because Jimmy's at the helm of the distribution team or the housekeeping team. I can understand how Jimmy is doing based on the data that I'm getting back. And then your role as a leader, you become more and more of a coach because you have objective ways to measure people, but you really start to recognize very clearly that if they are not performing, you will never get your performance, and you can understand who's performing and who isn't. And the typical performance evaluation today, I think is a limited value, because I think some employees are really good at managing their managers. And some employees that you may think are problem children may be really good at what they do, but they challenge you more. They ask harder questions. And I remember in the call center business, which is 30 years ago, I had massive amounts of data about the operation, almost too much data. It's like, oh, please don't measure their heartbeat because we understand every single other thing that they're doing. You have to manage this effectively, but you can do too much. But it's really quite amazing when you start to do these things that you can understand. And what our epiphany was, where I was going with that, was that these people were really good performers, but they were frustrated and they were, letting us hear it. And so we thought they were kind of problem children. And then we had our own awakening, which was these are really top people and we need to manage them differently. And they were frustrated with maybe our blindness or our inability to understand the business more deeply. But hotels are a long way away from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, but that's a very good point. And I was thinking about, let's say 10 years from now, how a traditional hotel organization structure might be different because of AI. That, whether you still have a cost controller or a procurement department, whether the supply chain AI thing is, the chef, there's this sort of relationship, because a lot of hotels in Asia have very big F&B, right? I mean, Marina Bay Sands, even small hotels like Icon had a five or six. So that supply chain interaction between, say, what the chef is procuring and buying and using, and how that is all handled. I mean, that to me would be something that is quite obvious. And I just wondered how, if you had a crystal ball, and looking ahead, how AI might transform the way hotels are traditionally structured, even and managed. Whether sales and marketing also is another one. The revenue director. Do they exist in 10 years from now?
Well, I think that marketing and sales and revenue management all become one, because you want to be able to understand the cause and effect of your actions, and you are measuring what happens, and you're measuring the spend, and you're measuring the reaction to that spend, and then what the result is in your actual operation. I think what you'll see is that there's more agency given to systems. You can automate repetitive work, so you will actually have more consolidation. You will have fewer people, but very bright people, managing a larger number of hotels or bigger departments, and more analytically about how that works. I think the top hotels, it's going to transform what you want out of your employees too, though, because I will be trying to. My term is and because we were working a lot on robotics as well, and part of data could be automation as well. But how do you take the robot out of the humans? When you check in at the front desk of a hotel, it's not a great experience for a customer. Someone's got their head down, they're tapping away, click, 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 click. You sit there thinking, how could it possibly take so many, keystrokes to get me into a hotel? Well, I mean, the hotel of the future, you're going to arrive and someone should be addressing you by name, and then telling you relevant things that would be useful to you. And all of that administration certainly exists. So, how am I then really recruiting for people who can make a tremendous impact when I have the luxury, when I have the privilege of coming into contact with a customer? Because it is by no means preordained that you have to. You may be trying to create friction or create ways that I can interact with customers, but when you have that, how are you going to make that magnificent? And then how are you going to measure what happened? And how do you train your staff to get better and better and better? So staff, I think, will become more theatrical, and then you're going to have a core also of people that are very analytical, very focused, and very bright at what they do. And the two don't have to be exclusive. Don't get me wrong. I think that my vision for hospitality is, how do we significantly increase the productivity of the industry so that we can pay people more, attract better people, and actually, I think it'd be the best job on the planet, because you'd be working with data, analytics, automation, and at the core of it, you're making people really happy, and you're getting paid a reasonable wage to do that. That sounds like an awfully good job to me. And yeah, AI could do chunks of it, but I think people still want people. And really, even the opportunity for disruption is at the lower end. How are you still inserting that human touch without stripping all these things out and saving on areas that the guests don't value, which is not something that brands do very well today? You got all these standards. That was one of the luxuries of Marina Bay Sands. We started going through all the standards and saying, let's test this. Does it make any sense? We'll stop doing it. Let's see if we get any complaints. It was amazing. Some things that you would have thought would be absolutely essential, not a word. And other things we realized, oh my word, we need to do more here, because that is such an important part of a customer journey. We need to spend more money. We need to improve what we're doing, and we need to continuously iterate to try and improve.
That's very interesting. And because I talked about this with a couple of other industry experts on a different platform the other day, the Institute of Hospitality in the UK, and they
Mm-hmm.
were talking about how, because of the sort of reputation that hospitality has, certainly in this country, they're finding it hard to get people to join the industry. Even hotel schools are being absorbed in the greater business department rather than standalone hotel management schools within the universities. And because there's less appetite for people to want to join. And they were saying, if there was a way that AI could actually make it more attractive to join the industry and make it, if there's more of a positive spin off to the actual employees themselves. And I think that's a very good point that you just made. Yeah,
Absolutely. And I think that, once again, I fear that our hotel schools are teaching where we've been and not where we're going. And
yeah,
I don't think the industry is evolving. I think there's real opportunities. I think you go forward 10 years, you're going to see some real disruption. And it may be a very different world than it is today. Um, well, we may see that the big brands become just pure marketing machines, and they walk out
yeah,
of all of the hotel management, and they control that brand. In many ways at the lower end for all the big brands, they're really very OTA like. They'll give you some standards and some other things, but really they're a marketing machine for you, and you're paying them percentage of what you're making in order to market you. But they'd rather not manage you, because it's really hard to find 5,000 general managers who are good and capable and manage and develop and groom them and get to know them well, and ensure that these standards are done. So that's kind of led to the white label hotel management companies as well, rising, who have a better focus on these things, because that's their bread and butter. Whereas for the
yeah,
brands, bulk of their money comes really from the marketing end, which is a bit ironic. But I think that the person that's not at the table of all these things is the real estate owner. And I think that we're going to start to see real estate owners start to question more and more as we go forward. But you know, for many, as I said, the assets performing close to what our pro forma was. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know that there could be X% potential upside in this, and the brand, they're comfortable. So everyone's quite comfortable right now,
yeah.
but I think there's untapped potential.
So, do you see a situation where, when a let's say, give an example, if a director of development or a brand, a senior brand executive for, say, Accor or Marriott or Hyatt or one of these companies, right now, when they're trying to sell their brand to an owner, they're advocating what a great HR system they have, or what great, marketing tools they have. I mean, is AI going to be up there on the top list now? So we've got the best AI efficiencies that we can sell this, better than any other or hotel organization.
Well, I think they'll all claim it. I'm sure that they're already talking about all the things they're doing with AI and how we're doing all this stuff with AI, because owners will ask it, and just like investors will ask it, the market will ask it. What are you doing with X or Y?
Yeah.
But there's a big difference, as we said, between truly a comprehensive solution and a point solution, which could be high profile, and it doesn't mean it's not beneficial, but you're not going to get the value of that much more comprehensive approach to
Mm.
things.
So if for a GM who's listening now and listening to what you have to advise, what's the single most important thing you would tell them? And what would they lose by waiting?
Well, I mean, the single most important thing I'd say is start, because this is a journey. And, I knew nothing when I started with this, and I've learned a fair amount now. And that's only by being curious and asking questions and seeking people out and playing with it and doing it. So figure out how you start, would be the most important thing. Focus on asking good questions would be the second one, as I said before. What are the most
Yeah.
important questions you can answer that will impact your business, and then do you have the data for them, or could you get the data for them? I think the if you don't start, as I alluded to before, to me, if you've got a competitor who is on top of their game and they are doing these things, particularly if you ended up with someone who was an AI first competitor, it's like a Formula One team deciding they're not going to start until halfway through the season trying to improve their car. You will never catch up, even if they have identical. Even if you dropped in the same technology, if you have a company that has built the culture around this, which is what I'm trying to do, and has the technology, well, then you're going to find that they can iterate and improve at a much more rapid speed than you can.
Right. And if any of the listeners are interested in contacting you, how can they go about doing that?
LinkedIn is a great way. I answer all my notes on LinkedIn. It's very, very straightforward. So, love to talk
Excellent.
with anyone.
Okay.
I learn from every single person I interact with. Um, I think it was Galileo Galilei who said that I've never met a person so ignorant I couldn't learn something from them. And we have many bright people in our industry, so I love interacting with people, which is probably why I got into the business.
Great. That's brilliant. Well, I really appreciate your help. And I think that there's definitely an opportunity for a sort of part two for this, Ian. So thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you in Singapore before too long. I'll be moving over there to base myself there with my family. So I look forward to seeing you soon. And thanks again. It's been brilliant catching up with you and to hear what you've been working on. So thanks for your time.
My pleasure. I hope people find it helpful. Really, I'm very passionate about it, and to me, it's crystal clear. Though it's always good to have contrarian views, but I believe passionately that this is how the world is moving, and this is what people need to work on.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.